Let's talk about demystifying REST calls in Therefore. My name is Jennifer Schmidt, and I'll be your host for today. So today's webinar will be available for download on the Therefore Extranet, which is extranet.therefore.net, and it will also be available for watching afterwards on our YouTube channel, which is Therefore TV. So chances are you're probably watching this on YouTube right now, so hopefully you're enjoying it, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at media@therefore.net. So let's talk about the intended audience of this webinar. The intended audience is non-technical people like myself. We will not learn how to configure a REST call, but we'll learn about possible use cases, advantages, and also see a couple of demos. The goal is for everyone on the call afterwards to be comfortable talking about this feature and be able to have a high-level conversation with customers. Of course, if you're a technical person, you're welcome to stay, but some of this information might already be something that you know. I just want to be clear about what the content will be so that nobody is disappointed or confused. So the goal is for everyone to know enough about this feature to be able to speak with customers about what's possible, but you won't necessarily learn how to do a call yourself. If you do have a job role which requires you to implement REST calls, I recommend reviewing Walid's eWorkshop, in which he walked through several examples. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to talk about what are REST calls, what are the advantages of using a REST call in a Therefore environment, what are the limitations of REST calls, what are examples of REST calls in a Therefore system, what kind of customer issues can be solved with REST calls. So let's get on to what is REST. REST allows Therefore to talk to other applications or services. So Therefore can get or send information from another application using REST as a communication platform. When Therefore sends out a REST call to another application, we can ask for or receive information from that application using REST as a basis for communication. So basically, Therefore has the ability to use REST. So just like we can talk to anybody who has a telephone, Therefore can talk to anybody else who also has REST. So REST stands for Representational State Transfer. It's a set of rules that developers follow when they create their API, which is the Application Program Interface. One of those rules states, for example, that you should be able to get a piece of data called a resource when you link to a specific URL. Each URL, like http www.therefore.net, is a request, while the data sent back to you is called a response. So in effect, we are all actually using REST calls every single day when we request information on the internet. And therefore, we can initiate a REST call using a workflow task. The workflow task will then start communication with another application or a web service, which is called the data source here in the graphic. The information is then sent to Therefore as part of a workflow. So what does this mean? And what kind of applications specifically are we talking about? Well, REST is a very common, popular type of communication platform. So it's available in many, many different applications and many, many different services. One common example that we might use a REST call for would be to get accounting information from an ERP system or accounting system prior to saving a document in Therefore, or vice versa. You might send information from Therefore to that third-party accounting system. We could also use it to update information about an invoice in Therefore, check to make sure that we don't have the same invoice in Therefore saved twice, or get information from a number of other systems such as Salesforce and more. So REST is very common, it's gaining in popularity. So most modern third-party systems do have a REST interface, which allows that type of REST call to be made. So here we have a couple of applications, a couple of logos here. These are just sample third-party apps. We haven't tested all of these through, and it's by no way an exhaustive list. It's just an idea to give you an idea of what could be possible to connect to. So when we talk about REST calls, there's actually two different types of, broadly speaking, of types of interactions that we could do with the REST call. One hand, we could do an internal REST call where we could check information or create information in Therefore. So we're using REST to talk to Therefore to allow different components within therefore, or different information in therefore, to flow more freely than it would otherwise. I'll be showing you a couple of internal REST calls that we use using web services. And then we can also do external, where we get or post information from an external service or application to or from therefore. And the external was what we were focusing on in the previous slide, where you saw the logos of a third-party application. So that's really therefore talking to a application that's not therefore. And here we're using the REST calls for therefore to be talking to therefore. So what types of methods are supported here in therefore? Get, post, put, patch, and delete. So we can use all of these different methods in conjunction with each other to create rather complex demands or rather complex exchanges of information. Get, this means we get a resource from a server. In essence, it means we can read something. For example, we could use the get method to get information from a third-party application, such as like Google Maps. We could get map information. Post would create a new information or new resource on a server, so it creates something new. We could post information about an invoice that's in therefore to an ERP system, for example. Put and patch updates a resource on a server, so it's kind of like an update operation. So it would update information. For example, you could use that for an internal web service call to correct information that was previously posted in therefore. And then finally, delete deletes a resource from a server, so it will delete that information. And I'll be showing you a demo later where we use the delete and post function together to create an internal REST API call. Now, of course, another thing to note is that not all third-party systems will support all functions. So, of course, you may be able to get information from Google Maps, but you can be pretty sure that Google won't allow, therefore, to delete information. So now that we have a little bit of information and understanding of what REST calls are, let's talk about what are the advantages. Why is this a real game changer? So first of all, the REST calls that we have in therefore are automatic. They're part of a workflow. So this means you set up the workflow and that REST call will just automatically update the information. Whereas you might have previously had to do a manual work, you might have manually had to check, might have manually had to copy and paste information from one application to another. With the REST call, it's an automatic function that just works in the background without any user intervention. It's modern, so a REST is a very modern, a very widely used method of communication. So it means that many different platforms and applications are using this, which allows therefore to have a lot of possibilities to integrate. And it's also relatively easy to set up. We have very good documentation, and it uses common programming language that's widely known. And kind of as a, in conjunction with that information, it's important to note that REST calls also work really well with Therefore Online. So as you know, Therefore Online is our hosted version of Therefore, where the server is up in the Azure cloud. So previous methods of integration, of previous methods of where you were really trying to connect Therefore with another application weren't possible or were very limited due to security issues with Therefore Online. With REST calls, we don't have that issue, and so REST is a really great way to do some type of light integration between Therefore Online and a third-party application or a third-party service. So we're now going to talk about some examples of REST use cases. The samples that I'm going to show you will come. I'll show you on a live system, but I wanted to show you just some big blue sky ideas of what you can do with REST. I obviously don't have access to a third-party ERP system. I don't have access to a lot of third-party systems because of licensing issues, but these things will work. But let's just talk about some ideas just to get your creative juices flowing. And at the end of this section, I want to hear from you. What ideas do you have that could be useful for your customers? What would you like us to know about? What ideas should we be showing in our demos in the future? So of course, the big one here is to get data from an ERP system to Therefore. So typically when our customers are using Therefore, they do all their booking in a third-party ERP system like SAP, Microsoft NAV. In Austria, a big one is BMD. So they do all the accounting in there, but they use Therefore, of course, to do the approval process, for the tracking, maybe for if their stocks audited, they want that. Also to have all of the invoices, if they have multiple locations around the world, maybe every location will do local bookkeeping, but then you'll want to have all the invoices available for viewing in Therefore so that you can then do the monthly figures or the quarterly figures as you need for your reporting. So in this case, having really good data exchange between Therefore, where you have the approval process, who approved the invoice, which account maybe is it going to be booked for, when was it approved, was there any special notes, anything like that, that kind of information will be sent then to the ERP system, or vice versa. Maybe the ERP system has, usually they have more accounting information in it that could then be sent back to Therefore, maybe tax rates or anything else like that, UID numbers, etc. Currency conversion. This one I think would be a really big winner. So especially in businesses today, you're often doing business with countries different than your own. You might have a business that's based in Europe. Maybe you're based in Vienna and you do business, you have a subsidiary with part in the UK and the US, maybe also in India, Poland, where they all use different currencies. And so of course it's important to note what is the amount of money in your local currency. Could also be for SOX reasons. You say any invoice throughout the company that's above 20,000 euros in value needs to be approved by senior management. Of course, as we all know, currency values can change day to day. So an invoice that's for 18,900 pounds, one day it might be above 20,000 euros, but then if the pound drops, then that might again be might still be underneath the 20,000 euro limit. So it's really important for businesses in that kind of situation to have accurate, timely currency conversion. And this is definitely a case where a REST call would be very, very handy. I mean, I know a lot of businesses where accountants are actually physically going into the currency website. They're typing in the currency per invoice to know, should it be sent on to senior manager for approval or not? How much is this actually going to cost us in today's currency rates? So having that currency conversion as part of a REST call would save a lot of time and decrease a lot of errors. One thing that I noticed, though, I wanted to show this actually as part of my demo. Unfortunately, most of the currency conversion websites that offer REST want you to do a paid subscription. So I didn't do it because of that, but it just goes to show that the companies who do currency conversion know that having a REST call is very valuable to businesses. It's very useful, and that's why they want you to pay for it. So no demo on this today, but it is something that I think a lot of businesses would really profit from. Another option would be to send an SMS. So as all of you know, sending SMSs is a really great way to keep in touch with your customers, keep in touch with your patients, and just get that better communication. So you could use a third-party service that sends SMSs to post data from Therefore to that third-party service, and then they send an SMS to the customers. And so there's a lot of different options where this would be useful. For example, to let customers know that their order has been fulfilled. Perhaps at a doctor's office, you could let patients know that they're next. This could be really practical if you want to decrease the number of patients that are in the waiting room. So you could have like an automatic workflow as the patients get seen by the doctor. An automatic workflow just sends them, hey, you're in the next 3 patients, come on in. So they can just wait in their car, for example, or go for a walk around the doctor's office until it's their turn to go into the waiting room. For students, you could let them know when their information has been updated, if there's like a new exam result available. for hiring purposes. You could send confirmations for dates and appointments. We're using a therefore workflow for our internal hiring process. So having the ability to confirm a appointment time with potential applicants would also be a great use of this. Or just general customer service. I mean, you could even have a service to send your customers like happy birthday greetings on their birthday. So the amount of use potential for like an automated SMS is just mind-boggling. And recently, I mean, with the coronavirus, we did, there was a huge testing event in Austria here, and everyone who was tested received an SMS with their COVID test results, like an hour after the test was done. And you can be sure that that SMS was not hand typed by somebody who did one of the nurses doing the exam, right? That was also an example of a REST API sending out SMS messages to people who did that test. So another really cool example on how this could be useful to people in their life. And so I just wanted to highlight that, again, this needs a third-party service. I just did a quick Google search. I found www.websms.at. We're in Austria, so this is something that will be local for us. But of course, you could use any other service. Again, it's a third-party service, so you would need to buy that subscription to that third-party service. But Therefore can offer it. So any information that you have in Therefore could then be sent using SMS in that workflow task. So that's kind of cool. Then in addition, we also have a whole bunch of travel information, maps information. All of this usually is also available via REST API. So airports often have a REST function where you can look up flight information, arrival times. That would be really helpful if you're like a taxi company, maybe if you have a lot of staff who travels a lot, obviously in the future when we can travel again. Google Maps also has a REST API where you can get their maps information. So there's a lot of possibilities that you could also do with those type of third-party services. And finally, the last bit is what I'm calling do some Therefore magic with internal REST calls. So this type of REST call is actually having different parts of Therefore talk to each other. I'll show you just now how you can use REST calls to check for duplicate invoices. So you can use a REST call to check if the same invoice has been saved in two different categories or not. And obviously, you can do that manually by doing a cross-category search. But again, that's a manual task. Somebody has to remember to do it. It's easily forgot because it's kind of a tedious process. It's not something that's really enjoyable to do. So by moving it to a REST call, you can free up employees' time, decrease errors, and kind of also increase the employee's satisfaction. I mean, if you have an employee who is a trained accountant, they are a highly skilled, very highly educated employee who's probably earning quite a lot of money. You don't want them to be wasting their potential and wasting their talents just copying and pasting information to check, right? That's really not a good use of their time. So by automating that kind of function and letting the rest do it, you're freeing up their time to actually spend it on very high-level skilled work, doing the actual accounting, doing the controlling, doing the budgeting, things that actually bring a lot of value and insight for your company. We'll also show you how to automatically create a keyword. So I'll show you how you can take a long list of Excel keywords and import them automatically and feed them into Therefore as keywords. So yes, there are alternatives to kind of getting a whole bunch of keywords in. You could create a view or do table replication, but this way using a REST call is actually easier and faster, I think. So finally, REST internal calls are also very powerful for Therefore Online. And once you kind of open up your eyes to what is possible, you'll see that there is really a lot of different options available with internal REST calls. All right, so we're going to start out with some demos here in the Therefore system. Let's log on. All right, so the first one we're going to do is we're going to do an internal REST call to check to see if an invoice has been booked twice. So So the common scenario here would be either you have several subsidiaries where invoices are coming in several locations, and maybe the suppliers don't know which location to send the invoice to, so you might be getting the same one twice, or maybe you're getting invoices both by email as well as physical mail. So there's a chance that they might be accidentally in the system twice. So here is our main invoice category. As you can see here, we have a lot of invoices here. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be comparing the invoice number with the supplier. If the supplier name and the invoice number of an invoice are the same in the other category right here, then the system should automatically delete that invoice. So let's open up this checking category here. And so let's start the workflow. And you can see here, now that the hit list has been refreshed, the invoice was automatically deleted. And so you can see here the system checked that invoice had been actually duplicate in that category, and so it deleted it from this one here. In the back end, if you look at the back end of this category, the way that this was done was in the workflow category here, check duplicate invoice. So the first is here, calling a REST function to execute a search. And then the routing task here, if the duplicate invoice equals the document number of the duplicate invoice, then it's deleted. And again, delete is also a REST function. So we can see here that it uses the REST function here to delete a document. So if you put the parts together, you can see how that kind of combines to work. The next, so that was the first one. We're looking at the duplicate invoices. Now we can also have a demo here with an appointment request. So this one here is actually kind of fun. What you can do is you can use an external service such as Google Translate to translate a message. So we were translating a message here in the text box from English to French. And so the way it should work actually is you can put in a requester name, like myself, an email, request an appointment date, select a duration, save it. And then it should translate it. There is an issue right now with the translation, but it did work in the past. As you can see, I was doing the testing here, but it was translating it into French. So let's just have a quick look at the back end to see what was going on here. So you can see here in their properties, REST function. So we're using here a translation service from Google APIs, and we can translate it to French. We can also translate it to any other language using the language codes here. So again, that's kind of a fun thing. We have to check why it's not working, but we'll move on. Then another really cool example of using external API web service, or external REST service, I should say, is this sample here, which is from Canon Europe. Rob Laumans was kind enough to give me the XML for this. So this here is actually using the API from Schiphol Airport, which is the largest airport in the Netherlands. It's one of the major hub spots. And they actually have a free REST API service where you can connect and get information about flights. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the airport arrivals, and we're going to get a flight number from them. So let's take KLM 706 KLM. And for those of you who are wondering, this interface right here, the beautiful image and the beautiful text, that's all there for category design. So my hat's off to Rob and the team who designed the categories here. These look fantastic, and this is really a great example of what is possible with category design, and therefore, I mean, fantastic. And so really great. You can see here, this one I had put in the flight number wrong because you need to have a 0 separating the letters with the flight number. So let's just delete that here. And then you can see here KL 0706. That was automatically populated here with the estimated landing time. So it's really, really speedy, and you can use it just to get information. So this is, I think, a great example of how fast and speedy web API REST calls can be, and combined with the really nice example of a category design they have here. It's just amazing. So let's look at that in the back end again. So let's open up our workflow. And moving here to the ship hole. And so you can see they actually have 2 parts to add 2 different calls. And so here they're actually getting it directly from the API from ship hole. Flight name equals the flight number. Then they have here from some status codes. So 200 is if it's correct, for example, and response handling, what you want to do. And so you're really asking the ship hole airport API to return some information about the flights based on the flight number. And then here in the second part, you can actually get then the airport family that's actually coming from. And so again, you have the information that you want then sent back to you, which is the aircraft description. So really cool kind of example on what's possible with a web service from an external check. And now finally, we're going to be talking about inserting a keyword. So this this is a little fun web services task where you can actually automatically insert a keyword into a therefore keyword dictionary. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to delete the keyword dictionaries that we have, just so that we have a nice clean work so that you can see it's actually working left. So REST, my REST dictionary, and we will delete all these keywords here. Okay. All right. So first things first, we can create a new keyword dictionary here with insert keyword. So we have a new document. And now we're going to select which dictionary do we want to use. We're going to use my REST dictionary here so that I can easily modify it and it's not going to affect my other demos I have on this tenant. And what keyword should we do? Let's do therefore TV. Save, and therefore TV. Start the workflow. All right, so we've started the workflow. And now what we should be able to do is we should be able to actually go into the solution designer and see that the keyword has been added. Now, of course, in and of itself, just adding a keyword dictionary like this isn't necessarily so useful, you might be thinking, because it's, adding a keyword dictionary item is something that's very fast and easy to do, and it's even possible to do it directly from the user interface as you're saving a document. So it's not necessarily a feature that seems very useful in and of itself. However, let me show you what you can do. All right, so we're going to try making, so we're going to do, for this demo, we're going to do a keyword dictionary from scratch, keywords. So let's do watch more on the Extranet. Okay. Next, let's do keywords. Save it as a CSV. Okay. So now let's try the document loader again. So now we're going to run this CSV file here. So this is a keywords too. So this fits our profile. And let's process it. Close. All right, and now we should be able to close and reopen the solution designer. Always remember to close and reopen so that the system has time to refresh. And let's go to our keyword dictionary here. And you can see now we have all of these new ones. Therefore, to be extra, watch more on the watch. So it's different order than what we typed it in, but there we go. We have a bunch of new keywords on the therefore dictionary. So that kind of concludes the demo. We have a couple of different options just to show what's possible with REST. And as you saw with adding the keyword dictionary, together with the document loader, you can really efficiently and very quickly add a whole bunch of new keywords, but of course you could do it with other therefore features as well. So that's something I think that would be really useful for customers who are just starting out with therefore. Maybe they have a long list of departments or they have a long list of goods, and it's just easier to set up a document loader profile than it is often to do a database view on just a static list of items like that. So having said that, let's now move back to the PowerPoint and learn a little bit more about REST. All right, so now that we've seen a couple of demos, I'm going to go ahead and move on to talk about how does a REST call diverge from traditional integration. Both the REST call function and the traditional deeper integration allows information from two different systems to be exchanged. However, in deeper traditional integration methods, for example, the SAP integration that we have, or the integration with Microsoft NAV, or any of the other custom integrations that you might have heard of, information is much more free-flowing, and it can be exchanged at more ad hoc intervals. However, the REST call is only available as part of the workflow, so we're much more limited in when and how that information can be exchanged. So if we think about regular deep integration between therefore and an ERB system, we can visualize it as the information flowing back and forth and merging on one side the other, like a busy freeway. Information is going in all directions, kind of more or less at all the times. However, the REST call is much more simple and straightforward. In fact, I would compare REST to a one-way street as opposed to a busy freeway. It's only available from the therefore workflow, only in the times and constraints that have been previously configured. There's no ad hoc REST call function. So if you haven't configured it in the REST call workflow, it can't be done. And there's no way for the third-party application or software to initiate a call to therefore. So the call always has to come from therefore to that third-party application. The REST call function must come from therefore when that workflow task is started. That means when you're setting up a REST call function, you kind of have to pick and choose what you get. And so in many ways, I initially had showed a REST call being two telephones, and that analogy isn't quite correct, because telephone, you can call anybody else who has a telephone at any time that you want. And you can say what you want to the other person with the telephone, and they can answer back what they want as well. And that's, of course, not quite analogous to the REST call function and therefore, because only therefore can initiate that call at a certain time. So if we were going to compare REST call to a certain type of telephone or a certain type of audio communication, I would say a REST call, and therefore, is much closer to a baby monitor. So the parent who has the baby monitor looks in at the baby. The baby, however, can't determine when they're being watched, and they also can't initiate a call to the parents unless the parents turn on the baby monitor, their receiver, right? So in many ways, that's kind of how the REST call works. Therefore is the one who initiates the communication, and it decides when it listens in to that other third-party application. So therefore, we'll only get information from the other system while the REST call is being initiated in the workflow. All right, so I think that kind of covers what can you do with REST call, how does REST differ from traditional integration, what are some of the constraints to think about. So now let's talk about some discovery questions, because there are really a lot of great scenarios where REST could be very useful. So do you often look up information in other websites? So are you updating therefore continuously, or index data and therefore with information that you gather from third-party applications or third-party websites? Do you have trouble accessing the database of your ERP or CRM system? And of course, do you have a process or a specific time when you look up that information? And of course, the other really big question to answer is, does that third-party application that you're working with, does it have a REST interface? So the two big ones are REST, and you might also see SOAP. So if the API is SOAP-based, that's a different method of communication, and that will not work for this type of workflow task. All right, so that's kind of a good starting point. If we have, if you want to look up what kind of REST calls do we have, what can we offer, I want to show you the documentation that we have. So if you are using Therefore Online, you just type in the tenant name.thereforeonline.com/the-service, right, like you see here, and you'll see a whole list of the different REST calls that are available. So here you can see a whole list of what is the operations method. So you can see here it's get or post. And then if you click on one, for example, let's say delete. You could do like delete dashboard. You can open that up and you can see an example on what it looks like. And then you can copy and paste this text here into the body. And more information is available in the Therefore documentation. So if we go to open up the Therefore documentation, We'll also notice that there is an API available. So go to therefore.net/help. And the web API reference, and here you can also see more information on what this does. So these are the references that we have available for developers. It's something that I hope also is useful to you. And so that comes to the end of the webinar today. Please send me some feedback. You can hold your phone up here and just give me some feedback, or you can type the URL into a web browser. Now, being that it's December, I hope that you guys are all coming into the year, coming to the end of the year, and thank you very much for staying in touch with us and following us on our various social media. I'm really happy to have you, and make sure to register for additional webinars in the future at therefore.net/newsletter. And thank you so much for listening.